recorded live.
Hello and welcome to the Castle of Horror interview segment where we talk to writers and creators of today's genre worlds from Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, creator of the new book Iron Thane, coming in April from Wordfire Press. This week we're talking to Kevin J. Anderson, author of so many things it's actually hard to put them into a sentence. Kevin J. Anderson is the author of over 130 books, 54 of which have appeared on national or international bestseller lists. He's won or been nominated for the Bram Stoker, Seamus, Hugo, Nebula, Scribe, and Colorado Book Award. That's a heck of a lot of awards, Kevin. I'm going to interrupt myself right now to say that. Okay.
Well, you're right. That many books, something gets noticed every once in a while.
Yeah. It's the law of averages. Kevin has written 3 X-Files novels. I interviewed you about one of them that occurs to me. Numerous Star Wars projects. 15 best-selling Dune books with Brian Herbert. He's also collaborated with Dean Koontz on Frankenstein, Prodigal Son, which sold 1 million copies in the first year of its release. He's also written a humorous horror series featuring Dan Shamble, Zombie P.I., as well as an epic SF series, The Saga of the Seven Sons, and a steampunk fantasy adventure novel with legendary Rush drummer Neil Peart, based on this concept CD, Clockwork Angels. This is absolutely true, Clockwork Angels, and people are asking about that all the time. All right, and there's one more thing. As the publisher of Wordfire Press, Kevin and his wife, Rebecca Moesta, have released more than 300 titles from Alan Dean Foster, Frank Herbert, Jody Lynn Nye, Alan Drury, Mike Resnick. I used to be on a chat room with Mike Resnick like all the time. Tracy Hickman, Jay Lake, Brian Herbert, Ken Scholes, and their own backlist, Kevin Climbs Mountains. You're literally in Colorado right now. He and his wife have been married for 25 years, and they live in a castle in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. That's a heck of a bio. Welcome, Kevin. Thank you for being with us.
And I'm a fiction writer, so you never know how much of that I made up. So
I think the castle. That's the one that I'm worried about. I've been by Castle Rock many times, and you know.
It's a castle. I've got 7 turrets and a portcullis and gargoyles all over the place, and but I don't want to say that because then we'll get weird stalkers trying to find my house. So
I would think if you didn't have gargoyles, that you would actually commission and add gargoyles. I mean, like that would be.
We had to do it right. So
you have to do.
And you forgot to mention that Wordfire Press also publishes your novel, The Iron Thane, which is just coming out the next week or two. I've ordered copies. I haven't put my hands on them just yet, but they should be here soon. And then your sequel to that, Spawn of Loki, and if they do well, we'll keep publishing them.
I've been working with your excellent editorial staff, and yes, I am super excited because this is a whole series that takes place in the world of Shakespeare's Macbeth, and it's very, very kind of you to point that out. That is awesome. Yeah, like 2 weeks we should be seeing that. All right, but I want to ask you about this new thing. This is 2113. It's an anthology of stories. I am not making this up. An anthology of stories based on or inspired by the songs of Rush, the band. So, and you're the editor of this project. So I thought it would be great if you could open with a reading from 2113, the anthology of stories inspired by the songs of Rush. What do you got for us?
I've got something, and absolutely any Rush fan who has listened to the album 2112 should hear some stuff familiar here. So here's my paragraph. The Oracle received a transmission from the rest of his armada throughout the solar system. All dream ships were in position. He rose to his feet from the dais, and when he activated the communication crystal, his voice boomed across all the frequencies controlled by the temples of Syrinx. The Oracle wore a grim expression. Attention all planets of the Solar Federation. We have assumed control.
Temples of Syrinx. So how is it that in 2016 that we are getting into fiction based on the world of Rush, the band, which I remember just captivating people.
Well, I got into it when I was in high school. I think I was a junior in high school when I got my first Rush albums from the Columbia Record Club, and 2112 was one of those first albums. And I was a nerdy kid in high school, bad haircut, thick glasses, hand-me-down clothes, and top 40 songs is all about your girlfriends leaving you. And I was this nerdy kid, and I was nowhere close to having a girlfriend, much less having a girlfriend leaving me. So I was much more interested in like science fiction, prog rock, fantasy epics that were on like Alan Parsons Project and Styx and Kansas, and Rush just really connected with me, and a lot of their songs inspired stories that I wrote when I was an aspiring writer. And my very first novel, Resurrection Inc., was inspired by the Rush album Grace Under Pressure. And in fact, all the songs on Grace Under Pressure find their way into the plot of my novel Resurrection Inc. And when I published that at Signet Books, I put in the acknowledgments that this was all inspired by the Rush album. And I got my copies as an author, and I autographed one for each of the three members of Rush, Alex Lifeson, Geddy Lee, and Neil Peart, the drummer. Yeah. And I put it in an envelope and mailed it off to Mercury Records, where I assumed it went into the place where the Ark of the Covenant is stored. And about a year later, though, I got a 7-page long, single-spaced fan letter from Neil Peart, the drummer, who had written all the songs on that album.
Wow.
And that was almost 28 years ago, and we've had a friendship that long. So I'll kind of do this convoluted, because I write big, fat novels, so I can't tell a short soundbite story. So Neil and I have been friends for a long time. We wrote a short story together. He wrote the introduction to one of my story collections. And then Rush was producing their own their own concept album called Clockwork Angels about 3 years ago, a steampunk fantasy adventure. And Neil contacted me saying, that I like steampunk. I mean, he had read some of my steampunk novels, and he was wondering if steampunk was still going to be around in a couple of years, because they were doing this big album. And I said, yes, I think it should be. And we started brainstorming the story, and as he's writing the songs, we're developing the characters and putting the whole the entire plot together of this concept album. So my wife and I met Neil for lunch at a diner in Santa Monica, and he was just so excited about the album he was writing, Clockwork Angels, and he was gushing about that it's not just going to be an album, it's going to be a Broadway musical, it's going to be Ice Follies, and it's going to be a novel. And Rebecca said, a novel? Who's going to write the novel? And Neil just looked at me and said, well, Kevin is, of course. And so the two of us were brainstorming the story and the characters, and Neil was writing songs, which are kind of like snapshots of the story, little, emotional scenes or character things. And we were developing the plot, and we wrote the novel, Clockwork Angels, which came out, and it was a New York Times bestseller. It won several awards. That's also a gorgeous book, because it has full-color illustrations in it that are by Hugh Syme, the guy that has painted all of the covers for all the Rush albums. And that's a beautiful novel to hold, and it was a big success. And so Neil and I loved the characters so much. We loved the world, we loved the setup, that we wrote a second book called Clockwork Lives that is it's not really a novel, it's sort of a Canterbury Tales using some of the characters and background of Clockwork Angels. But I think that one turned out even better. It's one of my absolute favorite novels of all the ones that I've written, and I'm very proud of it. And it's also a beautiful, pretty book. You should look at it if you get a chance to see it in the bookstore. It's red leather at cover. It's got gold ink embossed into it, and it's got marbled end papers and line drawings throughout, and everything is just perfect the way a book is supposed to be.
It really is a gorgeous looking book, because you can.
Oh, you've seen it? Okay. It is really, really, really beautiful, and it just got nominated for the Colorado Book Award. I just found that out last week. So, anyway, because I was so inspired by Rush songs, I knew that other authors must have been inspired by them as well. And I worked with a co-editor whose name is John McFetridge. He's a Canadian thriller writer. And we decided to come up with a collection of stories by other authors who were likewise inspired by Rush. And once we put the word out, we got this amazing flood of people coming in, these great writers, award-winning writers and best-selling writers that also were Rush fans. And they each, there was a lot of horse trading and choreographing on my part, but we were like, who got to write this song based on Tom Sawyer, and who got to write the song based on 2112? Who got to write the song? Right? And so, no, we didn't actually publish a new story based on Red Barchetta. We tracked down the original story that inspired Red Barchetta. We found the guy's like an insurance salesman in Ohio or something, and this was, of course, published 40 years ago. And we found it, and we got permission to reprint it, and that's in the book. It's called A Nice Morning Drive. And we also got another one that the album Roll the Bones, the Rush album Roll the Bones, and the song was inspired by a Fritz Leiber story called Gonna Roll the Bones, which was in Dangerous Visions. And Fritz has passed away quite a few years ago now, but we got the reprint rights to reprint that story. So we have a bunch of stories that were inspired by Rush songs, plus we have the two stories that actually inspired Rush songs themselves. But of the authors that are in there, we've got, I've got one in there, and Michael Z. Williamson, David Allen Mack, David Farland, Dayton Ward, Mercedes Lackey, Fritz Leiber, Stephen Saville, Brad Torgerson, Ron Collins, David Niall Wilson, and Brian Hodge. All of those are best-selling writers or award-winning writers, and better yet, big Rush fans. So this is a terrific batch, and it just came out. So for those of you who are
where
Rush
do you
fans,
get this one? Where can you get this one?
ECW Press published it. It's a trade paperback. It's the classic in bookstores everywhere, or order it on your favorite online bookseller.
For sure.
Is
there an ebook version?
Out. There is an ebook version, and just today the audiobook version came out too. So
wow.
For those of you
that's cool.
But the audiobook version is hard to listen to if you're listening to Rush songs in the background. So you might want to read instead. So there you go. And it's also got a naked guy on the cover, which is just like the Starman from 2112. So obviously, if you're not a Rush fan, it's a bonus. I'm thinking it's a bonus, although some people might need to put like masks.
I mean, I often wonder with anthologies, it must be like hurting. I mean, like writers, for Pete's sake, you feel like edit one novel, you got to deal with one writer and his flighty craziness or her flighty craziness. Mm-hmm. But to do an anthology, you've got something like 15 different mercurial introverts who deal mostly with themselves, and it just seems like such a challenge to put an anthology together.
Oh, I've edited, I think 8 or 9 of them, and yes, it is like herding cats, and I have given up doing it several times, but then I get another idea for an anthology and want to keep doing it. Yes, but the way I do anthologies is that I picked the writers that I wanted to have in them, and I talked to them ahead of time, and they're friends of mine, they're professionals, and I know that they're going to deliver. If they're flaky writers, then they don't get invited into the next one. And so I've kind of winnowed out the people that I don't want to work with again. So this one turned out really, really well. I'm very pleased. It's a huge spectrum of like edgy dystopian science fiction, and there's some fantasy in there. There's urban fantasy. There's some thrillers. Yes, we even have a story that was inspired by I Think I'm Going Bald off of the I think Caress of Steel album. I have my copy right here. I'm going to flip through and see if I can. There is one inspired by Tom Sawyer. There's one by Subdivisions, one by Natural Science, one by Witch Hunt, one by Digital Man, one by Losing It. That's a killer one. That song is one of my favorite songs of all of the Rush ones. Inspired by Mission, inspired by Lakeside Park, inspired by Marathon, The Spirit of Radio, Red Sector A, The Trees, Show Don't Tell, and Freeze. I think that's all of them if I read them in the right order. But anybody who's a Rush fan who has had inspired by the songs that they're listening to, these are stories that were likewise inspired by the music. So you know what to crank up when you're reading it.
I mean, what strikes me is, in today's, because you're also a publisher, and one of the challenges that you have as a publisher is you always have to think, we want to do work that is compelling and that strikes people, but that also has a cross-section with something that's already hopefully, something that's already in their psyche will make them inclined to pick this up versus that up. So, for instance, prog rock, and something being associated with songs by prog rock, that this is not just a few people. There's a massive fan base out there that you can talk to with a particular piece of art. At least I guess that's the idea, correct? I mean, you go, well, I know there's a lot of fans out there.
Well, and Rush has sold more albums than any other band in history except for the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, I believe. So they're not unknown themselves, and I think this.
Well, no, I mean that's what you depend. Well, I mean, depend is the wrong word, but for instance, this is the always, everybody wants to do, like, you are lucky enough to be like a huge Rush fan. Like the first thing that I wrote when I was a kid was, I think, a sequel to Billy Budd, and there weren't enough Melville.
Well, now you're doing sequels to Macbeth, so, you got to
true.
modernize yourself a little bit, Jason. You got to do stories inspired by the music of, I don't know, Justin Bieber or something like that.
We'll figure something out. But my point is, writers have these proclivities, right? There's things like I, the writer, any given writer, I'm really inspired by this particular thing, and by gum, I want to write about it. But what you've lucked into here is that, yes, Rush is huge, so you're into it, and a lot of other people are into it, and you can actually do the art and know that there's people out there that will resonate with, which is pretty darn lucky and cool. Okay, there's something else that I want. Oh, good. I'm sorry.
I don't want to be big-headed here, but I've done a whole bunch of stuff that were like really cool projects, from Star Wars to X-Files to Batman and Superman and Dune, and I'm used to doing cool things. And if I had to go back in time and tell my high school age kid, you know what, you're going to meet George Lucas, and you're going to work with the drummer from your favorite band, Rush, and you're going to write with Frank Herbert's son some sequels to your very favorite science fiction novel of all time, and DC Comics is going to come to you and ask you to write Batman and Superman. And I mean, that's like being the nerd in high school being asked, which cheerleaders would you like to date? I mean, that's right. Sort of, I have a cool job, I admit it.
And you do it in a cool way. And I want to ask you actually about your process, but actually before I do that, I know that there's something. So one thing I really admire about you, because I picked up a philosophy book from you about writing, about constantly writing and so forth. But it's totally true. You live that, because you got these two projects that are just hitting right now, and then you got another one that's just hitting right now. And this is sort of unusual. This is the Humble Bundle. So can you explain to me what is a Humble Bundle? And why is it happening? What is it?
Sure. Well, it used to be when you wanted to get books to read, you had your options were obvious. You went to the library or you went to a bookstore. And nowadays, with ebooks and with Amazon and with Borders books going out of business and independent bookstores coming up, but bookstores can be coffee shops, and there are so many different ways that you can sell books. And as you mentioned earlier, I'm also a publisher. I run Wordfire Press. We do about 5 books a month. We've had, I think, 75 authors and 300 titles that we've released. And just producing a book and putting it out there doesn't mean anybody's going to buy it. I mean, you have to figure out a way for having readers find your books and to sell your books. And there's a really, really innovative thing that's come out with independent publishers and small publishers. And it's run by a thing called Humble Bundle. And I think Cory Doctorow is one of the first people that did it. These are, it's almost like a grab bag where you put a whole bunch of books, they're ebooks, you put a whole bunch of books in, and people can go in and say, and name their own price and just get all the books in the batch. And in fact, in this new one, which launches on Thursday, the April 6th, so it's coming out very soon. It's got 18 novels from Wordfire Press in it. We put together 18 books, a wide range of science fiction and fantasy from a bunch of big-name authors plus some ambitious newer authors, and they all go in there, all 18 books, and you just bid what you want to buy. And I mean, you bid the price you want to pay for it, and if you above certain minimum levels, then you get extra bonus books and everything like that. But we've got this whole batch, and it only runs for 2 weeks. So you got to get them for 2 weeks. You get 18 books, which is a lot for you to read. You get 18 books, and the money goes straight into the publisher's kitty, which then goes straight to the authors. And then another chunk of it goes directly to a couple of charities that they've picked. And the 2 charities that I've selected for this one are the Challenger Learning Center for Space Science Education, because I'm a member of the board of directors. It was founded by the woman whose husband was the commander of the Challenger, and so her mission is to keep people interested in space and space education. So I'm a board member of that. So her name was June Scobie Rogers. Dick Scobie was the commander of the Challenger. And the Challenger Centers are all across the country and all across the world, in fact, and they promote making kids interested in space. And I want that to happen, so I'm supporting that. And the other charity that we're delivering to is the Science Fiction Writers of America Emergency Medical Fund for science fiction writers who find themselves in dire medical need, and that's some money that helps them get the care that they need. So all of that together, I'm going to rattle off some of the titles that we've got in here.
Yeah, go
one is called City of Saints, which is this really cool steampunk founding of Salt Lake City with Edgar Allan Poe and Mark Twain as opposing secret agents trying to get an airship design. That's by D.J. Butler. Echoes of a Shattered Age, sort of post-apocalyptic fantasy novel by Ramon Terrell. Virtual Destruction, which is a high-tech thriller science fiction mystery by myself and Doug Beeson. There's a new one called The Feather and the Moonwell, which is a new epic fantasy, which is part of our Wordfire line of David Farland discoveries. And David Farland's a New York Times bestselling fantasy writer, and he's also a well-known writing coach and writing instructor. And he's working with us to find particularly good first novels and that he wants to help promote. And Dave,
it's sort of like a Project Greenlight for fantasy novels.
Exactly. And Dave is not shy. He's one of the people who discovered Brandon Sanderson and Brandon Mull and James Dashner from the Maze Runner. One of his other writing students was Stephanie Meyer, who wrote a little thing called Twilight that some people may have heard of.
Yeah.
So the guy's got a pretty good track record at picking new writers, and the one that he picked was here called The Feather and the Moonwell, and the woman's name is Sheen Powell. It's a brand new writer, and it just came out. Book by Andrew Main called The Chronological Man, which is a time travel mystery. Another one by Neo Edmond called The Rise of the Alpha Huntress, sort of an edgy fantasy retelling of Little Red Riding Hood. And remember I mentioned earlier my first novel was inspired by a Rush album, Grace Under Pressure? Well, that novel's Resurrection Inc. I put that one in the Humble Bundle. So if you want to read a copy of Resurrection Inc., in fact, you can probably get the whole bundle for what you would pay for just a copy of Resurrection Inc. And Wordfire Press, I'm kind of going all over the place here, but we are really, really thrilled to be publishing some very cool books by people who were my idols when I was younger. And we've got a book called Ocean Earth, which is a brand new fantasy novel never before published by Alan Dean Foster, who was one of my favorite authors when I was
of course,
growing
absolutely.
up.
Yeah, no, I read Alan Dean Foster novels passionately.
Yeah, and
in the bundle, or are you talking about
No, all of these are in the bundle. These are all in all 18 of these books you can get for, I think, $15 or something like that is the minimum thing that you can get. We have a book called The Iron Thane, which is a sequel to Macbeth by yours truly, or
mine truly. I don't even know how you say.
I don't know how you say that. By this other guy who's the other voice. Sort of a noir science fiction detective novel called Chemical Burn by Quincy Allen. And something called The Dandy Boys Mysteries by Peter J. Wax and J.R. Boyette. Artifact, which is a high-tech thriller, kind of a combined novel that I wrote along with Janet Berliner, F. Paul Wilson, who's very well known for his Repairman Jack books, and Matthew J. Costello. Our conceit on that one was that there's a group called the Daredevils Club of people who are real risk takers, and they get together every New Year's Eve and tell about their exploits from the previous year. And they all do ridiculous, skydiving and take over oil tankers and stuff like that. And the book is about there are like 5 pieces to an alien artifact that's been broken up and scattered across the earth. So these members of the Daredevil Club have to go and find the pieces. And that's coming out. We've got, I keep saying this is really cool, but it's really cool. I'm the publisher. I can be excited about my own books. We are publishing an omnibus of 4 Frank Herbert novels that have never before been published. He had written 4 novels that he kept in his filing cabinet that he wrote before Dune was published, so before he was famous. And he wrote them. He completed them. They're thrillers. They're jungle survival adventures. There's one science fiction book in there, and we've got them all. And they were completed. He sent them to his agent. They're all done, and we're publishing them all together in one book. And that title is also
he wrote them
in the Humble
before. This is before Dune that he wrote these books.
Yeah, Dune was his second novel published. He published a book called The Dragon in the Sea in 1956, and after that he wrote book after book after book after book that nobody wanted to publish because he wasn't a big name. And then he wrote a book that nobody would publish called Dune, and then
Yeah.
somebody did publish it, and it became huge. So then Frank's career was made. But he never actually went back and republished those novels, and we just released them. And there's a brand new anthology called Decision Points, edited by Hugo nominee Brian Thomas Schmidt, and that's got stories by Robert J. Sawyer and Robert Silverberg and Jody Lynn Nye and Lois McMaster-Bujold, and I've got a story in there. Cory Doctorow has a story in it, and there's a never-before collected story, Ender's Game story by Orson Scott Card in it. So that anthology is coming out. A book called The Maids of Wrath by Josh Vogt. It's a supernatural urban fantasy series about some supernatural cleaners that clean up the messes after demons attack and stuff. That's a really funny one. Mario Acevedo, he's a well-known best-selling author who writes a vampire detective series starring Felix Gomez, and Wordfire just picked up that series with a new one called Rescue from Planet Pleasure. And when I say this as a warning, we all know that that's actually a selling point because you're going to run out and get it. There's a bunch of like really racy content in Rescue from Planet Pleasure, so it's got like a XX rating.
When people download the bundle, that'll be the first one.
So that's the one that that's the one you're gonna go to. Dandelion Iron is a new post-apocalyptic survival story by Aaron Michael Ritchie, another great Denver author. And we have Night Terrors, an urban fantasy in the Sarah Bohal. She's a blacksmith and a dragon slayer in downtown modern-day Seattle by John Pitts, and that's the fourth book in that series, and Wordfire just picked that one up. So I've gone on at great length, but the cool thing with the Humble Bundles is you get this whole batch. You just pay the minimum price, whatever it is, $15 or something like that. You get the whole batch of books. They're all delivered to you. A whole chunk of it goes to charity. You actually get to use little sliders and stuff and decide how much money goes into the author's pockets and how much money goes into the charity's pockets. And it only runs for 2 weeks. So by April 20th, it's going to be gone. Just 2 weeks. Wow. April 20th, it's going to be gone. So don't delay. Little commercials.
Right. No, but that's really cool, and I'm glad that you went through it because that there's a lot of like recognizable stuff in there. And it's a great.
Well, I think that is when you just look at a picture and you see a bunch of thumbnails of all the book covers on it, you go, wow, that's a lot of books. But when I started rattling these things off, I'm excited about each one of these books. I'm the publisher. We put them together. There's a reason why I picked these books to go, and I know all the authors. Every single one of these authors is a personal friend of mine, which is even you, Jason Henderson. So that's why we put them together, and our authors kind of know all of our other authors, and we do a lot of conventions and shows together, and we have a joy of writing books and selling books and publishing books and telling stories and meeting fans, and the Humble Bundle is a great way to just here's a sampler platter that for not too much money, you can get 18 books, and they'll all be delivered, and we hope that you'll read more of them.
I don't understand how do you consciously divide your time between writing the novels that you're writing and the fact that you need to read a certain amount of new books to figure out, like, first of all, a writer needs to read, but beyond that, a reader, like, hey, these are books that I'm thinking of publishing, or these are books that I need to understand so I can explain them to other people, or I don't understand how you divide all that stuff up. I mean, it must be, do you sleep? I think that's about it.
I don't know either. I drink a lot of coffee in the mornings, and I relax with some good microbrew beer in the evening. So we put all that together, and the honest and non-flippant answer to that is that I really, really love what I'm doing, and I can't think of doing anything else. And if I had 40 hours in a day, I would spend it doing the same thing I'm doing now. I'd just get more of it done because I've got all these stories in my head, and I've got all these books that I want to publish, and I've got all these the fans I want to meet and the readers that I want to bring in to enjoy some of our other books. And I love seeing. I just did it. Like, I can't see it on your face. It's going to come soon, but I just delivered the first copy of Sheen Powell's first book, the one I told you, the David Farland Discovery. She was just at a convention with us last weekend in Salt Lake City, and that was the first time that I got to hand her a copy of her book. It's the first time that she'd ever seen her book, and we had a display of like 40 copies of it there on the table for her with some of her other authors, and she's standing there signing her first novel right next to our guest, Christopher Paolini, who's signing Aragon and the whole series. Of course, Chris had 300 people in line. But can you imagine that as a first author? Your fantasy novel just came out. It's the first day that you're seeing your own books, and you're standing next to Christopher Paolini autographing books. You can't make this stuff up. You can't make that up. But just the joy I was seeing in her face.
I can understand the love of that completely.
So,
here's another question.
I like what I'm doing.
No, well, I mean, but I remember once, see, with the reading, of course, you sit back or you're at your desk or whatever and you read. But one thing I remember distinctly from the last time we talked about your process, and people have been telling me, you have to ask him how this works. All right. When I interviewed you for an X-Files book a long time ago, you said, actually, I dictate the first draft of these books into, at the time I think you called it a dictaphone or something.
Well, no, it was a microcassette recorder. It had the little tiny tapes in it that I would dictate.
So is that true? Do you still do that? Do you dictate your first drafts?
Oh, always. That's like the perfect way for me to do stuff. And, of course, it's a digital recorder now. And but I still have a human typist. I go out, well, you mentioned already, I live in Colorado. I live in the mountains. I've got all these cool places to hike. So I'll go out hiking all day long. I'll be out in the forest or in the mountains, and I'll have my notes for 5 chapters, and I'll just dictate. I think one day I did 48 pages just by, that was my record.
So what is the note for a chapter? I'm just trying to figure out how this works, like blow by blow. What does the note for a chapter look like? Does it say I don't know.
It's a paragraph. It's like Han Solo and Chewbacca go find themselves crash-landed on Kessel, and they get kidnapped by spice miners and are hauled down into the prisons, and they're separated, and Han figures out a way to send out a signal so that Luke Skywalker can rescue him. That's what my paragraph will say.
A heck of a lot of stuff for a chapter, I got to say.
Right, and that will probably turn out to be a 9-page chapter or something. Obviously I just made that one up. But my chapters tend to be between 5 and 10 or 11 pages long, depending on how much happens in it. And
you're talking about like 250-word pages, basically? So
yes. Yeah. So each
chapter might be words a chapter.
3,000-ish words a chapter. And I'll do 2 or 3 chapters a day just by having my notes to them. I'll go out walking, I'll come back in, and I usually finish that in the morning, and then I upload the digital files to my typist because I don't want to waste the time typing it. And I know what somebody's going to ask is, yes, I know that there's voice recognition things and Dragon Naturally Speaking, but I like to have my typist who is also a reader, and she knows where to put paragraphs in, and she knows how to do the punctuation and all that stuff. So
absolutely. And it has a human brain.
It has a human brain to tell me, this is really, really boring, Kevin. Why don't you, stuff like that. If it
there might be that. I was just thinking about the intellectual aspect that a human can tell what you meant when you said a word that's homonymic for something else, whereas Google cannot. It totally doesn't know.
Well, and also if I have running dialogue between 2 characters, she can figure out when I'm switching between characters rather than just this long stream of dialogue that I'm typing. But that's my process, and I've got it so that I understand how to make the sentences come out of my mouth instead of come out of my fingers, and I can go out writing. It keeps me in shape too because I'm walking miles and miles every day, and that's just my process. And other writers do it different ways. There's no particular way to do it, although I think mine's proved fairly successful because I've written 130 books. But I enjoy it. I enjoy being here in Colorado. I get a little uptight when the weather's really bad and I can't go outside and write, or if I'm staying in a big city for a couple of days, so you can't really walk down the sidewalk and dictate because there's too much noise and too many people around. But over the years of doing this, I've trained my brain so that I can make the words come out of my mouth instead of out of my fingers. I'm thinking like a storyteller. It's not that unusual if you actually think about it. It is very random to be thinking up words in your head, deconstructing how those words are broken down into letters, and then moving your fingers around on the keyboard to reproduce those letters. We speak, we talk naturally. So if I'm thinking up a sentence and then I'm talking my sentence, it seems to save quite a lot of steps as far as I'm concerned. So that's what I enjoy, and that's how I enjoy writing, and it's an excuse for me to go out hiking and working at the same time. I don't have to choose. So.
Wow, and it actually creates this bifurcation in your work, again, where your composition is not in front of a computer. Your composition is this out loud thing, and then also in your life you've got the work, which is the administrative tasks of a publisher, and then you've got
that's not the fun part. I could tell you that the flow of emails of cover designs and deadlines and editing problems and squabbling staff members and stuff. That's not fun. Making up stories and interesting characters and doing terrible things to them. That's a lot of fun.
That's really fantastic. All right. I am so thankful that you took the time to be on with us, Kevin J. Anderson. It's really a delight to get to talk to you and now to get to work with you. I've really that's been something I've wanted to do for a really long time, and I'm very excited to get a chance to do it. And I know that I'll get to see you in person pretty soon because we both are living in Colorado at this point.
Mm-hmm. And we're doing an event at the Tri-Lakes Arts Center in Palmer Lake on May 2nd, Saturday, May 2nd. I'm sure you'll mention it on your. It's something I want to say.
No,
it is May 7th. It is
7th,
May 7th.
Yes, the week after that. So it's about exactly a month from now, from where we're standing. So
we'll have a bunch of Wordfire Press authors down in the Tri-Lakes Arts Center in Palmer Lake, Colorado.
That will be a lot of fun. That'll be the first event we do together, actually.
Yes,
so I think it'll be. So, all right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on. We will talk very soon, and I hope people leave comments on the Facebook page. Kevin, last thing, where can people? God, it's such a stupid question because your stuff is everywhere. But where would you like them to go? If you want to say, hey, go here, I guess the first thing is the Humble Bundle.
Well, the Humble Bundle is a great way to get 18 books all at once, and I've got a couple of things that are in there. I'm on Twitter as the word the, and then my initials KJA, so at the KJA. Facebook, just look for my name. You'll find I've got an official fan page on there. I have a website which is wordfire.com, but it is one of those quote under construction things that we're literally fixing up right now. So give us a chance and go back to that one. And wordfirepress.com is another one that shows off a bunch of our titles. Also, you've seen on the highways where it says under construction that never gets done after 7 years and they're still working on the exit ramp. That's kind of like our websites. But I'm busy writing. That's not my highest priority, so just be patient with us when you go to our website. There's still some good stuff on there, but we're getting it fixed eventually. So thank you guys, and I hope that you'll read some of my books or check out the Humble Bundle or check out our press and read The Iron Thane too. That's another good one.
Thank you very much for that. All right, 2113 is the new book. Also check out Clockwork Lives. Also check out the Humble Bundle for Wordfire. Thank you, everybody. Have a fantastic week. We'll talk to you soon.